Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show UX Design to Win in Business. My name is Niels. I'm co-founder at Dinghy, a European-based UX design agency, and I'm here to talk to you about business impact of user experience design. That's the topic on our podcast, and I'm trying to demystify designer terms, lingo around user experience, the complicated world of how to improve your digital product from the user's perspective. And I want to untangle this myth for you, for everyone who's not a designer themselves, so that you can make better and informed decisions. So we're looking back at an experience of over 10 years by now, and the internet has changed a lot specifically in the last couple of years, I would say. So we've seen the rise of social media, of course. We've seen search engines become so dominant that nobody would ever type a URL directly into the browser and everybody's just searching. And now we see the rise of generative AI. We've seen through that almost explosive development of new digital products, many, of course, with AI features or solely hinging on AI entirely. And so what I want to do today is to extend on another example. Last week in the podcast, we talked about our currently ongoing project for SumUp, where it's our role to be the central hinging point in connecting teams. So I talked a lot about how it's important for a great user experience with the digital product to have an integrated team working on it. So I think that's an important point to pick up from last week's session, is that the only way for people with different backgrounds, and we need people from all sorts of different backgrounds to build a great digital product, that is the roles that you might already know: designers, front-end developers, back-end developers. We need sysops engineers. We need people to run a server. We also, of course, need people from marketing. We need people with the business perspective who have the business goal in mind of where we're even going with all of this and why we are developing certain features and why we are going for this and that target audience. And so everyone together can make a great digital product. Everyone in their own silo with very thin bridges that need to be crossed in the form of bi-weekly meetings or stuff like that. I think this gets complicated. And today I want to bring another example that is something very different than a big software as a service card payments company like SumUp. And that is an artist collective from Bulgaria. They call themselves Minatown and came through us. They listened to the podcast and reached out and said, look, we have a million ideas. We have great products like comic books that do custom storytelling for organizations. We're about to open our first museum in Bulgaria to connect people with the local culture and to tell stories. We're all artists, but we have so many possibilities that now we need someone to give us guidance, to someone to lay out the roadmap where we're going with this, and specifically how we're going to get there. And so what we're currently in the process of doing, and that's why I'm so excited about this project, is that we're compacting like a mini questionnaire about all of what they think about themselves. So this is a group of 7 people. We had a workshop where we took 2 hours out of their time, as much as possible, get behind the individual person to find out what are their individual goals for this endeavor, why are they in it, what drives them, what's the motivation. And we're currently in the process of putting together essentially their digital strategy for the next 6 months. And I think user experience design is a huge, huge factor in this whole thing. And I want to tell you this story because it's a good example of how this is not something that is in any way really connected with UI design, for example. So that is one of the main messages that I'm trying to get across in this podcast, is that UX design is not UI design. Like you see that often when in articles, in any sort of publication, when you're looking for jobs, like when you're putting out a job ad, I see many times the title UI/UX design. And UX design is not necessarily connected to creating visual artifacts or to come up with like a good and intuitive UI design. That is for sure one part of it, but UX design is much broader. So it encompasses everything that leads to a good experience with your customer in the end. That's like my main message. This is why I think that UX design is in fact much more related to brand design than it is to UI design, because also brand is this all-encompassing topic. It defines what people remember about interacting with your organization, with products from your organization, with the onboarding, with the support, with if there's hardware involved, how is the packaging? How is the delivery? Is it a reliable product? Does it actually solve a problem that I'm having in my daily life? So all of this sort of stuff. And what we're currently doing for Minertown is not UI design, not yet at least. What we're doing for them is that we're trying to reverse engineer how their customers will have a great user experience with Minertown in the future. And the way to get there is to, first of all, especially in this case, where they say we have so many different ideas and we can do so many things, especially in this case, I think the way to get there is to decide for something. That is probably not a super secret or anything, but I think it's a trap that many of us tend to fall into. It's like very closely related to the MVP discussion, for example, that we talked about before, like where the minimum viable product is always endangered by the so-called scope creep, which means you're trying to find out what is the minimum viable thing that we can put out so people actually already get in touch with our product. And then, out of fear that this is not enough, that the MVP doesn't solve enough problems yet, before the first version is released, the scope of the MVP is discussed and more features are added in, which increases the complexity of the whole product and then in turn puts the release date of this MVP longer into the future. And you have therefore less chance to get your first real feedback from users just because they can't use the app yet. And so with Minertown, as a collective group of artists, of former basketball players who now professionalize in creating events and being really good at art exhibits and in storytelling and in organizing their own events to discuss certain topics of local culture and to provide a vision for younger people. And so there are so many aspects of what they want to do with their craft that in our digital strategy that we're working on right now, we're trying to provide a guideline on how they can prioritize what they want to work on. Because same as in the MVP discussion, if you try to do everything at once, you're probably not doing anything really, or at least not to the degree that it would potentially be possible to work on. And so great UX design, I think, is a series of decisions that you took to work on something, to prioritize something over a series of other things. It's saying no to a bunch of things to have the possibility to say a strong yes for one other thing. Like the thing that you are really sure about, that is the one that needs all the focus and all the attention. And only once it's done and once that you know that your customers see it the same way, like you're getting positive feedback and people are engaging with what you're doing, only then can you broaden the focus a little bit and to see which other next aspect of your mission can kind of accompany this first success. Like how can I now start to solve another problem without overcomplicating the solution for the first target group? Maybe it's the same people who just have like another problem that you're trying to solve with this feature, and that's great. But I think individual and iterative development of features is one thing, but fitting them all together in the end. So they work cohesively, they work together, it makes sense to navigate through the app. That is something that is a whole other thing to do. And with our project with Minertown, it's a similar thing. So they have been, for example, they have some comic book artists in their round doing storytelling through comic books, through comic strips as we know them, like classical comic books that were printed and they were beautifully drawn, and they told the story of Plovdiv, the city that this group of artists comes from, Bulgaria. And they wanted to inform about certain aspects of local culture compared to the rest of Bulgaria. So it all started, in fact, with the word miner. So Minertown is called Minertown because miner means something similar to bro or dude in Bulgaria, but only in Plovdiv, only in this city. This is like a piece of local slang. But it's well known enough throughout Bulgaria that if you use that word outside of the city of Plovdiv, then people will know that you're from that area, because it's this word that is closely associated with Plovdiv. Anyway, they were telling that story in comic strips, in comic books, and were kind of successfully transporting the message of why people were saying miner in Plovdiv through comic books. And through this success, they started to have the idea that there are certain aspects of inner organization communication. So think leadership to all the employees at an organization, or team-to-team communication, or stuff like that, where organizations were really struggling to get a point across. So imagine you're coming on as a new starter full-time at a bigger organization. And there's just, that there's like certain inside jokes or cultural specificities at this organization that you as the newcomer, of course, don't know about. And usually takes time to learn about them, because there's nothing that you can put in the the organization's Confluence page just by writing down, we have this special way of greeting each other, or this special way of ending a meeting, or to celebrate successes, or there's this thing that we do on our summer parties. And so to do this and to bring people closer together, Minertown created their first comic strip with a custom story for an organization, like a paid service for this organization. And they told the story of like a certain cultural aspect inside of this organization. And that was a big hit because it was so well received. Like everybody who read the comic book immediately understood what they wanted to convey. And it made a much more sense than if anybody told you about it or wrote you an email about it or something like that. And so that was like one of the next revenue streams that they could make out. But they were also still on this thing with local culture and wanted to create an event in Plovdiv where they told everybody about Minertown and what they could do and all of that sort of stuff. So they had like the next expertise in creating events. And that is an entirely different beast than to draw comic books, to convey like a custom storyline for customers that would pay you to make a comic book for them. And so have a good user experience. It's important to make it easy for people to remember you for something. It's like what they call the Rolodex moment. When there's a certain aspect of whatever, then people have like one immediate association with it, and that's the Rolodex moment. So, for example, if somebody thinks about, I don't know, motorcycles jumping over a canyon in a blue and red jersey, then maybe you have the association with Red Bull, with like a fancy brand that endorses crazy extreme sports or something like that. Or if you hear like a very, very nice sound in somebody's living room, then maybe you associate that with Bang & Olufsen. Or if you have any other sort of these remembrances and that you think about something and have this association, then you want to be the organization that people have in mind for this. And If you're known for too many things, then, well, in theory, it would be nice to have like 10 different things that people remember you for. But that is a point that is very, very hard to get to. It's probably easier to think about one aspect and drive that one home, like to make that really, really good and have people remember you about it, and then figure out what goes with this experience. Like, what can I tack on that adds to the mission and doesn't dilute it on the other hand? Because that's always the risk. Like, to me, it's still absolutely astonishing that companies like Yamaha, for example, can make pianos, like extraordinarily, really amazing pianos. On the other hand, make motorcycles and still sort of be known for both. Like, that is an absolutely amazing achievement that probably took decades to build. And to start out, if you have like a bunch of really good ideas, then you really have to decide for one thing and start with that and double down on it and ask your customers if they enjoyed this process as much as you think they did. And if that's the case, then slowly you can try to tack onto this one. And I think this is also what our point is for Minatown, that we will work with them to see how we can take the steps behind each other, like one step at a time, to go into the right direction, deciding for what this one step is going to be. And before we take the next step, to validate that this step was successful and that it actually had some traction and is not slippery on ice. So with this picture, I want to leave you this week. Thank you for the attention. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you have a topic that is on your mind that you would like to discuss, maybe you would even like to come on to the show as a guest, I'm always open to suggestions. And other than that, I hope you have a great week and see you on the next one. Bye.